So just sitting comfortably, but try and be, for a little while at least, forwards in your chair, just to remind yourself of this strong feeling that develops of even in the chair, your legs being an active part of all of this. As always, that will mean also that your back is unsupported. So if it gets to the point where that's uncomfortable for you, sit back. But just have this in mind. About a third of your weight in your feet, and that slight tilt forwards, so that if you imagine the square with the line across my hips at the back, I don't want to be right on the edge of that square. I'll get this feeling of sort of being about to fall backwards. There's a slight angle forwards. Other than that, the feeling in your upper body particularly is actually the same as the standing. And so this is a useful one to practice, because of course when we're standing we don't have the support for our back that we might have in the chair, and we want our back not to be hard and rigid, but it retains the sort of flexibility that we like. The spine itself is a flexible set of bones. But we do need to be able to get to a point where we can recognize when our upper body is being supported by the lower body, and how that comes about. And rubbing your hands together, and tapping over your face. Over head and neck. One shoulder, your arm. Other side. Belly. Now, feet out. Settle back in your chair. Relaxing back in your chair. Not a term I will often use, but we do want to get that feeling of relaxing. A better way of thinking of this, a better term, more appropriate in some ways, might be to empty. And that too is just an initial stage, because you can't just empty and have a void. Something has to replace that, whatever you've just lost. But a kind of draining away, of releasing, an almost sort of floppy feel. And I suppose the difference between relaxing and emptying is that it wouldn't be floppy in that sense. I've sometimes used the analogy of comparing a tent to our overall posture. If you have a tent, and the skin of the tent, when it's not erected, just flops all over the place. You can roll it up, or it gets blown in the wind, or something like that. So when we bring our feet in and we come to the upright position, if you set up a tent, you one way or another provide it with a framework within the tent initially, and then you pin out the guy ropes and things. And so the transition from that kind of flopping back into the upright position is actually a very similar process. You have to find what it is that kind of underlies the structure of the body, or lies within the structure of the body, is going to continue to support you. You also want to get this feeling of your weight dropping down. And both of those are facilitated by this feeling of relaxing again, but that has quite a limited lifespan, because if you relax, you just drop down. We relax the tightness in the upper part of the body, or again, the better term might be to release the tension in the upper part of the body, in order to recognize what lies underneath, to recognize that inner structure, that inner strength. And then turning your head gently. And one way or another, we build that. We want to get a sense if say, for instance, with this exercise, you have this idea that your spine, that your whole skeleton, but specifically your spine, is part of that inner structure that supports you, then think in terms of, when you turn your head, of just a simple, gentle, quite minimal rotation in the top 2 or 3 vertebrae of your head, of your spine. And then your shoulders. Going forwards. So when we start to do this, we start to get a sense that the movement begins very deep in the body, with really quite minimal movements and a minimal amount of effort. And this builds slowly and smoothly through our body. And of course, this is an aspect of the body's energy as much as anything else. Hands out to your sides, rotating. Winding around. So we can begin to take this approach with these very simple starting movements. Then it's a method of movement that will serve as well as we get into the more complex exercises. You will find yourself, if you practice like this, quite naturally, quite intuitively, looking for those connections and finding and working with those connections. Go back the other way. Rest your hands. When easing forwards and back. Coming back up, there's a bit of a push from your feet, a bit of a pull from your hips. So trying not to retighten in your back and shoulders. That smooth feeling of movement. So your spine will just floating forwards and backwards. and then turn a little. In another direction. And then going all the way around, doing that rolling movement in your pelvis and your weight moving. Eventually you realize that for all the movements, particularly as they become more of the whole body, there's more than one thing, more than one source for the movement. And it's the drawing together of those that is one of the tasks of our awareness. And then back the other way. It's a perfectly natural way to move, but as soon as we become aware of something, it can start to feel a bit kind of clunky. Breathing is a really good example of something like that. And back to the center, and then stepping out, back. On the other side. So let your hands drop down to your side. Weight back in your hips, hands facing forwards, and then bird folds its wings. Your arms rotating with the transfer of your weight. And then change into fisherman cast the neck, leaving your hands facing backwards. And your arms begin to swing. So obviously a key component is going to be your weight moving. And with the movement of your weight, this angling of the body in the seated position, standing, it wouldn't do that. But then having established that as the prime sort of source of the movement, prime drive of the movement, what else do you notice? What other parts of the body are doing something that is a part of this movement? Rolling the ball in. and then pigeon spreads its wings. Edge, an expansion in your chest, then gently begins to draw back, pulling your arms in and opening your back, upper back. And then that again reverses. One more time. Then you're just going to let your hands come straight back, elbows still going out a little bit, pushing wave. One more time. Now your elbows don't go out, so the movement is absorbed into the rotation of your arm. Punch with both hands. So you can see that my arms rotating from palm up to at most palm down, maybe less than that. Now open your fingers, rotate your hands out, almost like you're doing the breaststroke. All of these movements are based on the transfer of your weight from feet to hips. So the variations come in the upper part of the body, the area above your hips. One more time. Bringing your hands back, changing to polishing the table. Turn your hands palm down. One more in each direction. Turn your hands palm up again. Now with a gentle push through your feet and your hips, pushing your hands up and then pressing down. So there are several ways that we can view this, and indeed any of the other movements. It's worth spending a bit of time with this though. I just said one of these things, so that's pushing down through your feet and your hips. So it's almost like what you're doing is this. You're standing up and then sitting down. So that's a reasonable first way of looking at this. This makes sure that you are still aware of the role of your feet and your hips. Now in standing, I sometimes say to people, you imagine that you're on a trampoline, or you imagine you've got a ball that you're straddling, one of these big blue gym balls, and you drop down on the ball and then it expands and pushes you up. And that's quite a good image for standing, because it also means that you become aware of the space between your legs. It's not just these two sort of like thinnish things hanging from your hips. You can take that idea of the ball into your body, into the area between hips and waist. And I think in many ways this is the sort of ultimate aim, to feel that the movement again works from inside out, not from outside in. So if there really were a ball there, if you were to say drop your shoulders down or let your hands drop down, let the weight of your head drop down, it would compress the ball, and the ball would then expand. You would feel the push up, and it would lengthen through your back, also push down through your feet and your hips. So you're retaining that connection downwards towards the ground, even as the top of your body, ribs, shoulders, head are expanding upwards. And then change into the wild goose. So it's good to play around with these images and to find different perspectives on the movement. And as a general trend in terms of how we might progress these movements, the general direction of that is from if you like, an externalized awareness to one that doesn't exclude the external awareness, but if the external awareness is an awareness of the edge of a circle, there's a huge space there that can get filled in. And with that comes a softer, but also stronger approach and development of the movement. And then parting the clouds. And dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Compressing, expanding, compressing. Put your attention to the other side for the next expansion. The yang to yin. And we need both. It's like if you were going to fire an arrow from a bow, you wouldn't be able to fire it unless you wouldn't be able to go forwards unless you pulled the string back to begin with. Now, both hands together. That compression release is a traditional way of looking at the dynamic within the movement in Tai Chi. It's often applicable to the martial aspect. Sometimes the term used is load and release, as in sort of like loading up the arrow or something like that. There's like so much else in Tai Chi with the martial aspect. It has a huge significance in every other aspect, particularly when if we're looking at if for instance this movement, well, it's a bit tight in my back and it's quite difficult to get my arms up. Rather than struggling with that, get that real sense of compression here, increase the amount, potentially to increase the amount of energy that comes out of that. One more round. Next time your hands go out, you're going to push your heel out, knees still a little bit bent, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Feel how your back, the spine lengthens, especially as your hips start to go back. Because even as your hips go back, so here, my hips start pulling back about here, but the sort of momentum of the movement in my head is still forwards. But there's just that little bit of an extension outwards. So rather than compression and release, it's extension and release. But it's the same principle. One movement primes your body for the next movement. And then grasping the tiger's ears. And then on the other side. Scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then changing, grasping the tiger's ears. Good. And then bring your feet back. Turning to one side, moving your weight across towards your left hip, and then turn towards your right foot and let that draw your weight across and back. And then turn towards your right, bring your weight into your right hip and diagonally across to your left foot. Just go through the weight transfer pattern for Part the Wild Horse's Mane. And again, we can think of this in different ways. We can think, well, our weight moves and our center turns, or we can think we turn in the center and our weight moves. Both are equally valid, but it will vary according to one movement or another, or sometimes it will vary according to how we're actually looking at a movement, and which aspect of that movement we're looking at. Ultimately, it's going to be both. You know, it isn't separate. Yeah. We're going to just do one more of these. Come back into your left hip, bring your hands around in front of you, and into Part the Wild Horse's Mane. So you're back in your right hip, you go forwards into your left hip, left leg and you turn. And that turn stimulates a rotation in your shoulder that rotates your hand out. And your hand also moves up a little bit. So, don't forget to bring your attention back to movement of your weight, the sensations of movement between hips and feet, turning in your center. Remember that feeling of your arms relaxing, not having to do anything. And then just try and introduce the idea that there's a structure and a shape really provided by your intent. So obviously you need to get to know the movements a little bit in order to be able to see these things through. One more on each side. And then let your arms rest. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. On the side. Chest. Belly. And then your legs. Good. Okay, and oh no, that's it. Does stand. Yeah, just pushing your heels up, get the legs working a little bit. And then back the other way. Okay, now we can stand up. When we start to view these movements from the inside, the movements actually start to become simpler, because no one movement is going to involve something very big or very complicated. So just sinking down, and pushing up. This is a movement that we use for rooting down for the wild goose, the part in the clouds, the dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Same movement. So if we're rooting down, we imagine holding the ball and we push up, turn the hands over and press down. To change to the wild goose, it's very simple. You rotate your hands out, and as you push up, the arms get pushed out to the sides and down. And again, the next change is very simple. Drop your hands down, cross them in front of you, and push up. Then again. But this is a view that is almost entirely concerned with what our arms and our hands are doing. Begin to use this exercise to feel what else is happening. So as you do the rooting down, focus on your belly and lower back and just feel the movement expanding and contracting. Just in that part of the body, your arms won't move very far. Turn your hands out now, expanding your belly, and then feel the movement expanding in your solar plexus that pushes your arms out a little bit further. Remember, your hands are going to cross now, so it's your elbows that get pushed out a bit further as you expand up into the chest, and your hands just almost literally swing out. Do that again. So a minimal change of position in your arms combined with an increase in the amount of expansion and contraction we can produce working up progressively through our upper body can give you three quite different shapes of movement. But now, this time, change the dragon plucks the stars from the sky. The light part in the clouds, it expands upwards through the whole of the body, but on one side. That in and of itself doesn't explain the whole movement. Because the elbow goes out, but because the hands aren't crossed and your fingers are hanging down, rather than the arm circling around, it goes straight up. So if, for instance, my hand were crossed like this, and I did the same thing, it would be more like part in the clouds. But because the fingers are straight down, and again, it's a relatively small change. So this time, do one dragon plucks the stars from the sky, then just simply cross your hands over and do a single part in the clouds, and then do the dragon on the opposite side. So within the body, we've got this same expansion up and down through the body. The only change is going to be here, we cross the hands. That's all. That's simple. Here, we let the hands hang down. Here, we cross the hands. One more on each side. Good, and then shake it out. There are only so many ways we can move our body. And there's only so many ways, even fewer ways that we can move our bodies without, how can I put it, without straining them. Yes, we could do cartwheels or stand on our head. We could go up on tiptoe and try and touch the ceiling. People have done extraordinary things with their bodies. They've folded them up so they can get into small spaces and so on and so forth. But we actually don't do any of that in Tai Chi. The whole point is to try and increase the efficiency and strength and so on, the energy of our whole body in a very natural way. We're not trying to pretend that we can fly, for instance, and so on and so forth. So using the body in the way that it has evolved over tens of thousands of years to move. So it's actually fairly limited in what we can do. We're not, we look to expand those boundaries, but not to break them apart. Now have one foot forward and begin to transfer your weight. This is a definitive movement. So in the chair, when we were doing part of the Wild Horses Mane, I took you through the weight transfer pattern. It's actually more complicated in a chair, because in the chair you've got 4 points of reference. You've got 2 feet, 2 hips. Here, you've only got the 2 feet. So the choices are fairly limited. Your weight can either be in or moving towards your back leg, or in or moving towards your front leg. And then raising your toes and your heel. And stepping in. And shake out. Now, the other foot forwards. Raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. and step through. Again, with the stepping, you can step forwards, backwards, or sideways. And there's bits in between, but it isn't complicated. And generally what we do in these classes, go in the other direction now, is we will use a linear step in, forwards and backwards. Parallel. Along with that, we have basically three possibilities with where the center of our body is facing. So we can face forwards, to the right, or to the left, or it can be in transition between them. So for instance, when we do fisherman cast a net, the center's facing forwards all the time. When we do something like, trying to think of something, yeah, when we do stirring the beans, the weight is in transition in the same direction as the feet. So when I'm on the front foot, I'm facing forwards. When I'm on the back foot, I'm facing out to the diagonal, and then forwards, diagonal, forward, and that gives me the movement. When we do Wind Blows the Willows, which we will do in a moment, I turn the opposite way. When I'm on the back foot, I turn away from the feet, and so on and so forth. So it's relatively simple. The individual components of all of these movements are relatively simple. And when we can begin to understand that, we can begin to find a component that is missing, if you like, if we're having problems with the movement. We're going to start with one of the simplest of all. One of the most lovely exercises, of course, is fisherman cast a net. Here, your weight is moving forwards and then backwards. You're facing forwards and backwards. Your arms are swinging forwards and backwards. It's a very simple formula. And then you go into your back foot, and as you do, you turn towards your front foot. The wind blows the willows. Now, it's not to say it's easy. You know, getting the movements to work is a long-term prospect. Getting them to move well and so on and so forth. What it isn't, what it shouldn't be, is complicated. Nor should it be to do with the cleverness, shall we say, of what you're doing in your shoulders and your arms. Our arms and our hands can be very, very clever indeed. We know that in all sorts of ways, but they don't have to be in Tai Chi. So try those two movements with your left foot forward, starting with fisherman cast a net. When you go back this time, turning into Wind Blows the Willows. So this is why we put so much time and effort in Tai Chi, into practicing simple movements, like, for instance, the transfer of our weight. I mean, that is one of the primary ones that we will practice regularly. And then you can turn the front foot out a little bit, come through and step. Dragonfly skims the water. Settle down into your front leg, bring the foot through, up if that's comfortable, but be careful and step through. This time, instead of just putting the foot down, let it swing back. And remember, if you get confused, your weight goes back, you turn towards the front foot. Everything else will follow on from that. One more time. And bring your feet back. Go back to your chair. So when we're urged, for instance, in the Tai Chi writings, this lovely phrase that we should seek the stillness within the movement, you could equally well say seek the simplicity within the movement. They amount to the same thing. There is an increasing complexity, but the complexity increases as you move out from the center of the movement, and that's important to remember. So let your hands drop down, push your arms out, embrace tiger, return to the mountain. So to discover that simplicity, to discover that stillness, we bring our attention back deeper into the body. It doesn't stay there, and there's never the intention that it is going to stay there. But we return to it on a regular basis. And this time, come to rest. Lovely. Well, that went quickly, as always. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.